Welcome, everyone. We have a fantastic webinar for you today. We've assembled experts from the aviation and banking industries to give you their insights on the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the actionable steps you can take to maximize your time. And for some quick housekeeping before we get started, can everyone hear and see the presentation? Great. And if you have any issues with your phone audio, there's also a computer audio option. And if you have any questions, we have a live Q&A at the end of the call, so be sure to stick around for that. We do have some pre-recorded segments, but this Q&A will be live with our panelists. And to kick things off is the team from VREF. We have Ken Dufour, Jason Zilberbrand, Dick Hart, and Neil Fulbright. So VREF has a wide variety of appraisal options for aircraft owners. Ken, can you walk us through VREF's offering?
We offer appraisal services, actual on-site appraisal inspections, as well as desktop appraisal inspections. And we'll speak to the new current situation shortly about the changes and requirements through the financial institutions about doing physical inspections. And I have a little piece on that. But we link both entities together to provide those services to the industry.
And what changes have you seen with appraisals since COVID-19 started?
The practice is not that much of a variable from what we've had in the past, but because of COVID-19, we've recently received some direction from USPAP Foundation, Appraisal Foundation, Freddie Mac, and Fannie Mae in reference to allowing desktop appraisals to be conducted instead of physical inspections because of the national emergency and the pandemic. So we're taking a look at showing folks that basically the desktop is the same actual appraisal in lieu of a physical inspection. We still look at the characteristics and the specifications of the aircraft. We still look at the maintenance records and obtain all possible data that we can to do our analysis. The only differentiation is that we don't do or can't do a physical inspection. And that's the only real difference. The analysis is the same, the standards are the same, and the results should be the same on a value basis. Freddie Mac recently on the real estate side, which just to show you a comparative on the real estate side, issued some guidances to real estate appraisers that if they photograph the subject property, if possible, to show a map of the location and dictate that it is a desktop appraisal, no interior inspection is required. Additionally, Fannie Mae has similar guidelines that an external inspection is appropriate with a street map and descriptive photographs. So all of this is allowing, less contact or no contact with individuals to keep up your proper distancing. USPAP also, the Appraisal Foundation, did similar guidelines and to address the national emergency, and they said that if you can get photographs, videos, maintenance records, and you have reliable sources, then a desktop would probably be more appropriate during this national emergency.
Would it be fair to say there's going to be a massive shift towards desktop appraisals versus going in person?
We've always done a fair amount of desktop appraisals. That is not unusual. It's somewhat the nature of the beast because time and money and travel, etc., will run up the cost of evaluation, which we can do virtually everything we need to do on the basis of a desktop. And we just, have to indicate those parameters that we're doing that. We offer the possibility that in the future, if you do require the asset to be inspected or to be looked at, then we can, we do that at that time. We've also had some folks not only do current photographs, because photographs are tricky, you have to make sure when they're dated, and or videos.
And has there been any issue with the banks with regards to desktop appraisals?
Most of the banking community are familiar and accepting of a desktop scenario, and we can always caveat it to say that we can follow up in the future if you so desire.
And to change gears a bit, Jason, what are you seeing from private aircraft owners?
The smaller the aircraft, I think right now, most owners, operators are doing maintenance, getting ahead of maintenance, doing refurbishment, things that they can do to either keep their smaller staffs busy, keep the hangars busy. Um, Overall, as crazy as it sounds, in the piston market, especially, there has not been a huge slowdown to activity. We're still busy. We're still seeing closings. People are still buying aircraft. More importantly, they're still flying. I think for a big segment of piston aircraft owners, this pandemic has actually been, a hobbyist dream because they don't have to deal with work and all sorts of other responsibilities. So people have been flying a lot. Granted, it's been local and they haven't been going to, beautiful destinations, but they're still flying.
What would you say to an aircraft owner looking to sell right now, maybe a panic seller?
I think it sends a really bad message just to the general market if you were to put an asset for sale right now. I think it kind of screams distress, even if there might not be any. And I think that most of the brokers that I've spoken to have shared that as well. That their advice to customers are, let's get the aircraft maybe prepped to sell if sell is what you want to do, but now's not the time to do anything. Um, and I think overall we've been trying to really crunch the data as it comes in. I mean, granted, the closings are not what they were, 6 weeks ago. They're still happening, but I think, the smaller the airplanes, the better off we're going to be coming out on the other side. I think where all the questions that people have had, at least the ones that I've been getting from both media and from some of the larger financial institutions, is, what is our take on the business jet side? And I think there's a definite silver lining, and that is I think there's a lot of people that are going to use this as justification to go and get lift, and whether that's through a twin engine piston aircraft with that market that's been kind of had better days. I think there's probably better days ahead for that segment. I think you're going to see a lot of people get into aircraft that might not necessarily be a $3 or $4 million business jet. So I do think that the twin engine piston market could potentially flourish from this. I also think there's going to be a bunch of differences on the coming out of this than there was in 08, 09, and then in 9/11. And that is because we have such a robust pre-owned industry today. And there's a huge, delta between brand new aircraft for sale and their comparative 2 or 3 year old versions. And I think that spread between values is really, it's going to benefit the pre-owned market for a long time to come. And I think the manufacturers, obviously, it's real easy to furlough people and it's easy to shut down manufacturing. It gets really complicated to spool it back up. So I do think that the manufacturers are going to, unfortunately, not sell a lot of new aircraft. I'm sure that's already factored into most people's, numbers and what they're going to forecast for the end of the year. Pre-owned aircraft are going to continue to sell. And I think that there is a bunch of aircraft out there for smaller budgets, and combine that with cheap interest rates and bonus depreciation and a pretty healthy financial market. And that's the other major difference. 08, 09, the banks were going out of business. Banks aren't going anywhere today. They got lots of money to lend. They like aviation. They love to lend on assets. We're capable of doing the appraisal work. There's no reason to send people to do asset management anymore. I think we've all gotten really good at doing things virtually. I did a virtual walk around yesterday on an airplane. I think we're all going to get through this. We're all going to be better for it. All of us collectively couldn't tell you what's going to happen in 6 months with the values to any of these aircraft. But if I was a betting man, I would believe that we're not going to see a major slash and burn, especially on the piston market. Single engine piston aircraft are going to continue to flourish. I think the twin engine sector that's had a rough decade or so is going to bounce back. And I think smaller to medium sized business jets are going to continue to flourish.
Great. Thank you, Jason. And Dick, have you noticed a similar shift in the helicopter market?
So what I've seen is that I have not seen any aircraft being dumped on the market. Haven't seen anybody trying to bail from their equipment. I think a lot of the helicopter operators and owners are going to try to weather the storm and keep their equipment, since they probably expect their jobs the jobs that they're using the helicopters on to start back up. When we go back into full service mode. That being said, if this delays too long and the jobs that the helicopters are being used on don't return in a timely manner, the cost of the helicopters on a monthly basis is so high that we may see a larger increase of aircraft for sale. I hope that doesn't happen, but it has happened in the past. I've been in operating helicopters for 45 years, and I have seen it two different times where in the late 70s, 3/4 of the helicopter industry went out of business because of the oil embargoes and the fuel situation. So it has happened in the past. It could happen again. But I think the operators today are savvy enough to hold on to their equipment and see light at the end of the tunnel and put their aircraft back to work.
And what advice would you give to a helicopter owner right now?
I can tell you with helicopters, I already have two of my customers installing upgraded equipment on their aircraft during this down period. One, to keep my people busy, and two, to increase the value of the aircraft and its usability when this turns around. So that's one thing they could do. Again, I think I think it'll be short term enough to weather the storm and get through later in the year when we can start flying again. So that's one thing they must do, though, is make sure they keep them airworthy. You have to run them. You gotta have your mechanic look at them for calendar date in stuff and make sure that they're airworthy.
And now to shift to aviation education, Neil, what changes have you seen in the university setting? Is everything shifting online now?
This is across every university, every training organization. Everybody has shifted to an online, public schools, all the way up through graduate systems, and everybody's switched to an online format. Everybody's kind of getting used to this new delivery. Whether that's going to stick or whether it's going to help change the way that we pedagogy, I don't know, but right now, everybody is getting through it. Everybody's made this shift to a different type of learning, and some of the stuff, you can't. I mean, pilot training, you're going to have to, sit side by side. So that we kind of got to just kind of put on hold for a little bit. But the other stuff, anything that we can do online, virtually, AI, whatever, we're trying to get that done.
And we're also looking at different procedures to do flight training in the fall at Embry-Riddle, taking temperatures before you get on airplanes, doing more online educational presentations, which we've always done through our worldwide campus, and now we're going to be doing more of that. You might say that the college experience is changing drastically, and it's going to be different. Obviously, we can't avert much of that with an instructor and a student in an airplane, but so we have to take some precautionary trends to do that. But it is a changing dynamic there by all means. And also, this may give a bigger door opening to the UAS and UAV market, because some of the traditional flying we've been doing and some of the reasons we've been using helicopters/airplanes may open that door even wider than we have it now, and that projected multi-billion-dollar market may even get bigger.
That's an interesting point. Ken, what advice would you give to a new aviation student right now?
If I was advising a young man or a young woman today entering the educational environment, I think it's almost mandatory that they're going to have to pursue a dual path of UAS operation as well as piloting. I think it would be their advantage to pursue both on a parallel course and be accessible and be able to use both type formats to go forward in their career, because it is going to change. It's going to change rapidly now because of the pandemic. So I think it's their best interest to do both at the same time on a parallel effort, because it'll get them further down in their career.
And what about opportunities arising from new regulations with regards to cleaning, sanitization, filtration? Do you think we'll see businesses pop up in these areas because of regulation?
I not only think that's going to be regulated, I think the market's going to demand it. I already talking to some people that fly as much as I do on the airlines, or even fly in some of my aircraft for charter or tours and things. We're already being asked, are we sanitizing our headsets? Are we sanitizing the seats in between flights? Are we, do they need to wear a mask? Some of my pilots, we still have done a few tours because fortunately we're considered in this, even though we're in the tourist flying business, anything airport related is considered essential. So we're still allowed to fly in Los Angeles. And the customers we've been flying, my pilots have been wearing a mask while they fly. And the passengers, we said that if they want to wear one, they can, although we do tell them we've sanitized the headset and other parts. So I think but that's coming from the market. And I think the market's going to demand that up the entire chain, from the smallest charter aircraft to the biggest airliner.
Fantastic. Some great takeaways here. So to recap, desktop appraisals are going to be more necessary than ever. Aircraft owners should use this time for maintenance and doing necessary upgrades. This is not the time for panic selling. The financial markets are still healthy and interest rates are low. The helicopter market is holding steady with no degradation in value. Aviation training is shifted to online training for the time being, and students should also consider looking at UAS as well as traditional pilot training. And new regulations and market demand will create new opportunities for aircraft sanitization and air filtration. And now for an update from the European market is Dr. Andreas Grossel from VREF.
Hello, everybody. I'm Andreas Grossel, and I'm VREF's Senior Appraiser in Europe. I've been in this industry for almost 40 years as a pilot, an aviation attorney, a claims adjuster, and an aircraft appraiser. In the last couple of weeks, I've been asked by many colleagues and friends from overseas how we Europeans cope with COVID-19, or what we Europeans did about it. And my answer is, unfortunately, there is no European policy on COVID-19. The EU, the European Union, has no competence in healthcare, so the 27 member states and the 18 non-members, in total 45 independent countries, have to pass the laws and regulations on how to stem that virus. And some countries like Germany or Austria have a federal structure. That means that the federal states have to decide what to do. So in mid-March, the Europeans were faced with more than 70 different sets of rules to be complied with. As you can imagine, those rules were inconsistent and therefore caused a lot of confusion. Within days, people stopped traveling because nobody wanted to become stranded somewhere, or even worse, be quarantined for 2 or 3 weeks. In consequence, demand for air travel dropped dramatically, and the airlines started to cut down their schedules. And by the end of March, most of them stopped operations, except for some evacuation or cargo flights. At the same time, business aviation saw a pronounced increase in demand, but due to more and more governments imposing lockdowns, travel between European countries became almost impossible for business aviation too. But there are also good news. As we Europeans went into lockdown quite early, infections decrease now, and the governments start to gradually lift the restrictions. We all hope to see a recovery of the general economy soon. However, limitations on personal travel will continue until summer. So the airlines announced that they will resume operations slowly and cautiously, and not before mid-May. And they also announced to cut down fleet size and restructure their networks, because they do not expect that the price-sensitive segment of their customer base that was responsible for most of their growth in the last years will return quickly. My impression is that the industry leaders are very confident that the economy will recover soon, and a certain reshaping of the airline industry was necessary. They all agree. So there is a chance that the airlines will fly out of the crisis in a healthier and more profitable size, and business aviation will be able to regain markets they had lost to the airlines in the past. It's illegal. In summary, I want to say 2 things. Many European countries reacted early, and so they can begin to lift the restrictions now. So there is light at the end of the tunnel. And me and many others are confident that this crisis has set in motion a necessary change of our industry. Thank you for listening, and I'm happy to take your questions in the Q&A section.
Thank you, Dr. Grossel. Next up, we have Chris Leach, an attorney from Carrier and Little. Chris, how's it going?
Doing well today. How are you?
So for those who aren't familiar with Carrier and Little, what do you specialize in?
We're best described as a boutique aviation law firm. So predominantly for the GA sector, obviously, and really that's our main focus is business law within the aviation world.
How's COVID-19 impacted operations in the legal world?
What I can see is that there's the nature of the work is a lot of emergent issues coming in, people having real quick kind of questions. There's the legal implications on almost any aspect of an aviation business or an aircraft operator or potential purchaser. There's just myriad issues.
And what are some of those issues that you've seen?
Yeah, we've seen everything from clients that that kind of want to take maybe a timeout and sit on the sidelines, so to speak, in terms of conducting a transaction, to clients that have unfortunately had to, they've had to reduce force, they've had to take more extreme measures, unfortunately. So we've certainly already seen some fallout because of that. Our hope is that this is short term and that the lasting effects kind of remain to be seen.
From a legal perspective, what recommendations would you give to aircraft owners?
From my perspective, they need to look at their contractual relationships and how they operate, how it's connected to their business. And what we see right now is the issue of defaults. Obviously, there's cash crunches on all sorts of businesses. And even if you're healthy, businesses and people you rely on may be struggling. And that can cause an impact on your operations, regardless of your own business health. And unfortunately, those that are going through some tough times and being strained in a way too have to kind of forecast the likelihood of potential faults or defaults on their contracts as well. So that said, the biggest thing I've seen is that if you see a problem, don't ignore it. Don't wait and see where see what happens. You need to address it, and the big thing is communication. From what I've seen is communicating those problems and working through them is the best way for a solution. The downside is that when someone simply goes dark and they're not communicative, that's where I've seen the real problems arise, not just through this, but through any business that's going through a financial hardship. A big consideration in looking at any contractual relationship you have, whether it may be an aircraft purchase agreement or any contract, is the idea that because of COVID-19, there's an inability to perform. A lot of contracts, commonly we have a force majeure clause, which is essentially an unforeseen circumstance. Those clauses are not one size fit all and need to be reviewed by counsel to determine how they may affect the relationship, and they may excuse performance. They may more commonly delay performance, but they're important to think about because we're seeing those notices go out. And even if you are able to perform your side of the deal, so to speak, but you have reservations about the other side's ability to perform, expecting or anticipating a force majeure notice and understanding what the implications are incredibly important.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. And next we have Clay Healy from AIC Title. Clay, how's it going?
It's going pretty good. How are you doing today?
Great, thanks. So Clay, I've noticed Oklahoma City is a popular location for aircraft title companies. Why is that?
The title companies are all here in Oklahoma City because the FAA sits in Oklahoma City. So the easiest way to describe that is if you bought or sold a home, you went to a title company and they handled all the paperwork for you. We do the exact same thing here for aircraft. The easiest thing for people to understand is that. I think that way when we explain it, someone goes, oh, I get it. And the only reason that it's in Oklahoma is the FAA is down the street and my staff goes back and forth anywhere from 3 to 6 times a day, taking paperwork back and forth to file on behalf of our clients.
And how many closings do you do in a typical year?
We did approximately 6,000 closings where we actually held funds last year. A little between 5 and 6,000 a year. We did between $5 and $7 billion in closings on those aircraft. The other areas that we help people with is we do their title reports when they need to know who owns a plane, who has a lien on the plane. We also help the OEMs, the banks, and everyone else to do their filings at the FAA or anything that they require being filed at the FAA.
So how has COVID-19 changed the closings and other aspects of the title business?
As you can see, this room did not exist a year ago. We had to put together a room so we can do conferences over video that we really never had. We designed this room to soften our voices so you can hear us pretty well. And really, honestly, the only reason this has happened is because of the transactions that we're having to do, as we're doing with you right now, over a video. I think it's going to affect us a lot in that aspect. We're going to do more of these type of meetings where we can go in and show someone exactly what we can do for them and help them and assist them. And it also gives us a great opportunity to help train our clients on some of the benefits that we have in our aircraft closing room and different ways that they can use our software to enhance their business.
What's been the biggest change you've seen in the industry at large?
The thing that I think is affecting everybody a little bit more than anything is the dramatic shutdown that we've had with the commercial industry. I really think that general aviation is going to get a little bit of a pickup on this because of the fact that people are going to look up and say, you know, I don't want to get in that plane with 300 other people, or I don't want to do that. So I think charter, some of the general aviation assets where people are finally saying, you know, I really can buy that SR-22 and I can fly pretty much anywhere I need to.
And from your perspective, what should aircraft owners be focusing on during the pandemic?
So really, it's a great time to do some of those things that, you haven't done, just like we've done at our house. When's the last time you cleaned your closet? Well, I've cleaned mine twice now. So there's a lot of things we can do that'll help us move forward. And as far as getting the work done that we need to do at the FAA and to provide you with that information, we're still open. We're still doing the work that we need to do. And we're able to provide you with anything that you need to know about an asset.
Fantastic. Thank you, Clay. Next up is Tal Clark from CoFlight. Tal, can you tell us a bit about how CoFlight works?
CoFlight is an innovative new aircraft management software that we just started back in December, launched the product, launched the app, and really excited about the traction that we're gaining right now in the aircraft marketplace. It's really designed for general aviation owners so that they now have the tools to manage their aircraft, their airworthiness, and know the readiness of their aircraft up front before they go to the aircraft. So it has everything built in it, from tracking to maintenance, so that you don't miss those items that are recurring intervals that you have to make as inspections. Scheduler, we have a payments module built in. All together, it's very unique in the aviation space for the private owners, and we're excited to put it out there.
And what trends have you seen among your customer base?
Been a lot of questions about what they can and can't do, right? I think it's been a little bit uncertain in the aviation space. Can I go fly? Am I going to have challenges at certain airports with parking, getting fuel, that sort of thing? So I think the biggest thing that we've been hearing is just uncertainty about the opportunity to fly, whether they can or whether they can't. If they do go fly, maybe those airports that are open versus those that are not, or places that might have restaurants only on side of the airport versus those that might be closed. So we're seeing that impact more than anything else, just a lot of uncertainty, which I think is what goes with this entire virus environment that we're in, right? So much of it is just built on uncertainty. We just don't know much about it at this point.
What would you recommend a private aircraft owner do right now?
We're really recommending that we focus on those things that you can get done while you're not flying your aircraft. So any administrative responsibilities you need to do around your aircraft, setting up CoFlight right now, it's a great thing to do because you need your logbooks. You can pull those logbooks, set up those recurring intervals, put in your maintenance records, all those things we need to help you get started. And we're also just launching a partnership with VREF Vault as well. And when that's available, people will be able to actually start putting their logbooks. And so having all that available to you and having the time to go back and do some of those administrative tasks, setting up your aircraft, making sure your insurance is current, any training that you need to do. Maybe you want to go get the next rating, and there's a written test that you can start preparing for.
And do you see any long-term changes on the horizon in the aviation space?
It's going to be interesting to see how it works. You know, we all deal with air traffic control at different times, depending on the airports that you're going into. And air traffic control, the controllers are typically within pretty close proximity to each other. So I don't know how that's going to change, but I would guess there's probably going to be some impacts there once we get the air traffic volume back up. You know, I know those guys are going to be thinking about how they manage that. I think for us as pilots, I think just like the rest of the environment and anything else you do, we're going to be very careful about who's getting in the aircraft with us, because most of us are flying small planes. There's not 6 feet and sometimes not 6 inches between us in many of these planes. So, you know, family, friends, all of that, we just have to make sure that everybody's being very careful. I do some work with Angel Flight as well. And so in some cases, we'll be carrying patients, and Angel Flight and others right now, charitable organizations, I know are doing things today to make sure they're very careful, still try to carry on that charitable mission of moving patients or whatever it may be. But at the same time, being very careful about, you know, protecting ourselves as pilots in those missions, but also protecting our passengers and the patients who could be susceptible to this disease even more. So I think that's what we can look forward to, is just being more careful in everything that we do.
Awesome. Thank you, Tao. Next up, we have Kevin Hoffman from Janus Aerospace. Kevin, can you tell us about what Janus does?
We have a group called the Janus Group. It's a team of experts that have been assembled, probably with about maybe 30 to 35 years worth of experience, each of them. And what we've really been working on is to put together the what's called an IPT. And an IPT stands for an integrated product team, or an integrated product development team. And this is very similar to the way the OEMs operate in terms of designing and building airplanes. So they basically have a group of people that are represented from each of the different sections, and ours is no different. And so for when we're upgrading aircraft, or we're doing a new design of an airplane interior, we basically have teams of people, be it the engineers, the designers, the salespeople, the customer, the program managers, and they're all related to, they all work together to finalize or bring the project to its completion.
And have you seen any pivots from your clients since COVID-19?
One of the groups that we work with over in England, they charter aircraft as well, and so there's been a pretty big uptick of charter activity. In the beginning of it, there was a big activity for repatriation of getting people back to their homes and stuff like that. So, but this has kind of continued on, that people still travel. They're still quite busy with their charter and stuff like that. And what we're really looking for right now is to find a time when we can, a quiet time when we can actually take the aircraft down and have some maintenance done on it.
What should aircraft owners be doing in light of the pandemic right now?
This is probably a good time. If you need to get certain maintenance done, which maybe it's some of the mandatory maintenance that needs to be done, like the FANS 2020 stuff. However, we typically look to work on aircraft when it's coming up to its 10-year or 20-year inspections. And now the reason for that 10-year inspection is basically the 8C inspection. But the reason is that it's a very extensive inspection, and it requires taking the interior out of the aircraft to do the inspection. What better time to refurbish or upgrade the airplane? And So there's basically three levels that you can do for the upgrading. There's basically simple soft goods replacement, which is leaving the floor plan very similar to what you had. Basically, soft goods are things like the leathers, carpets, the fabrics, headliner, sideliner, dado panels, that kind of stuff. Lots of things change in reference to connectivity, Wi-Fi, broadband, all kinds of stuff like that. That changes pretty drastically over a short amount of time. So if you're bringing an airplane in for a 10-year inspection, you can pretty much guarantee that a lot of the stuff that was originally designed or spec'd into the airplane will definitely need an upgrade.
Some great takeaways here. Kevin, thanks so much for being on the show. And next up, we have Dan Dunn from Addison Aviation, as well as Glada. Dan, what do you focus on with Addison Aviation?
We're a corporate aircraft brokerage. We do consulting, sales, represent both acquisitions and dispositions.
And has your consulting shifted with the pandemic?
We're expanding our consulting capabilities to our clients for basically we're doing complementary consulting based on the market conditions. We wrote a little piece that I put on my website called Viral Markets, trying to compare and contrast this downturn with the last one, and we're just trying to stay close with our clients right now.
Have your clients made any pivots as well?
The sellers are asking us, should they put their aircraft on the market? And I think we're coming back to them with a, should you or do you need to sell at this time? And I think almost consistently we're giving them advice that if they don't need to sell, that now is probably not the time to put the plane on the market. And the buyers on the other side are all staying very engaged, looking for those values, those that aren't, tremendously affected by this, and especially the high net worth individuals. We see those guys are staying on board and watching the market day by day, week by week, and then kind of watching the developments to see when it is that they're ready to enter and make their purchases. But so far, myself and all of the Glada members have noted that we haven't lost any clients. We've just paused some deals.
We've heard that from a few panelists today that this is definitely not the time to sell.
If you don't have to, don't do it. But we're seeing a heavy amount of refinancing activity too, and three primary causes that people are doing it. Interest rate, liquidity, and payment deferral. Not all the markets are the same. We're seeing the tightened markets in the high efficiency, mid-size category holding their percentage of aircraft for sale at or under 7%. And we're seeing some significant transactional activity happening in that segment. But also what we're seeing is a little bit of the slowdown that happened before the pandemic that affected the cash flow of some of the corporate flight departments that have been prevalent in the marketplace, has now accelerated that cash flow problem and is accelerating some restructuring and transactional decisions that may be made in their own fleets and inventory. Pricing activity, we see some strong reduction in some markets, highlighting the G450, the G650, the Challenger 605, and most long-range airplanes, notably, particularly the Global series of airplanes. But again, the pricing isn't moving very much in the XL and the XLS markets, and we still see some value drivers in some of the Hawker and Citation areas.
And you mentioned that the ultra high net worth individuals would be fairly static. What about fractional ownership and charter operations?
The card providers and the fractional providers are shutting down. So we have millions of people that are enrolled on those programs that can no longer get airlift, even if they own a subscription, a card, a fractional share, or the like. And the charter business is getting massively impacted as well. I can't get a management proposal on an airplane because they're laying off all their staff and they're submitting their SBA loans. So operating an aircraft coming out of this is going to have to look like some consolidation in the management company side. Further than that, we're going to see a lot of folks that have owned part of an airplane or a card or had some supplementary airlift that they're not going to be able to have anymore. And so it's going to be interesting to see what that means. Does that mean that we're going to have a glut of airplanes on the market from these operators? They'll be used in high time, or does it mean that we're going to be able to convert these guys into full aircraft owners? I think there's a lot of fear in the airlines right now, and I think we're going to see a lot of people looking at the efficiency of private aviation on the lower side. And so I think we need to be ready to act on that.
And what is one takeaway that an aircraft owner should have?
There's going to be an incremental increase in value if they need to move up, even if they take a loss to sell. The incremental increase in value and the deals that they can get in this marketplace will probably overwhelm that if they're stepping up. there are going to be some really nice opportunities to buy. And then I think corporate aviation is going to strengthen, not weaken overall, even if we see restructuring of the ownership type. I think we're going to see a lot more high net worth individuals and corporation in this marketplace.
And next up, we have Michael Anton Adam from ChainTrax. Thanks for joining us.
So Michael, ChainTrax leverages blockchain technology. Can you explain to us how that works?
Basically, at the base of it, blockchain is a ledger, a place where we store transactions. However, blockchain technology uses some pretty advanced tech to make sure that the information on that ledger is safe and can never be changed or altered, which is pretty unique among this technology. So every transaction that goes through blockchain is then verified on a distributed ledger. So hundreds, if not thousands of computers all verifying that information at the same time, making sure that it's accurate and again, it cannot be changed. So if you think about aviation and all the important logbooks, maintenance records, documents that we have, if we can use this technology to secure that type of information, that benefits the aircraft owner, it benefits all stakeholders from the aircraft. So it's a really powerful tool that we can use to ensure that our information is safe, secure, and correct.
And a running theme we've seen today is that now is the time to focus on maintenance activities. Do you recommend focusing on updating your logs as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, now's the time to really get out in front of your aircraft and, actively manage your asset or assets, and be ready for when we all come out of this thing. I mean, we have the time now. So now is the time to look into digitizing anything, cleaning up your entire ecosystem around your aircraft, and really looking into new software just like the VREF Vault. And that's what it's there for. It's there to help you in that kind of journey and walk you through that process to get everything in order. And once you're up and on the system, which is really easy to do, then you're set. You're ready to go going forward, and your house will be in order, and your life will be or the life around an aircraft is a lot more manageable.
And what do you see on the horizon with regards to aviation and blockchain, particularly in the context of the pandemic?
I'm sure a lot of financial institutions out there that have aircraft as assets on their books are, really concerned about where documentation is living now, making sure everything is in order. Again, this only helps that out. COVID-19 itself and kind of what we're going through, it may have a direct impact on documentation going forward. And again, I basically believe that's going to be make sure you have everything in order, make sure you can present everything to anybody that needs it. And that's really hard to do when it's in a paper form, right? So if you have somebody that needs to see some documents now, just having it in a digital version is so much easier. Just this world that's our new normal is going to create kind of a next normal. And I think that next normal is a lot of remote communication and information exchange.
And next up, we have Sam Harris from Jet Loan Capital. Sam, what type of financing does Jet Loan Capital specialize in?
Chris, we are an independent aviation loan broker that specializes in financing only aircraft, business use aircraft primarily, everything from general aviation assets like pistons and turboprops up to larger cabin, long range business jets. And we act as an independent aviation loan broker, meaning that we place those transactions with banks, credit unions, leasing companies, and other funding sources within our network.
And from your view, how has COVID-19 impacted the financial landscape?
So here's basically what's happening. Our piece speaks to the aircraft financing markets, specifically for financing business aircraft, owner-flown general aviation, all the way up to large cabin long-range aircraft. And so these comments they're general, but this is what we see across the spectrum. So in the current update as it relates to COVID-19 affecting the financing markets is that, first of all, the Federal Reserve, as everyone knows, has cut interest rates in the last several weeks. So in general, the interest rate environment is now less than it was several weeks ago in terms of borrowing for business aircraft. But there's also been a few other things that have been hand in hand with this when these things happen. So first off, the aviation lending landscape continues to be very dynamic. And it's changing quickly with lenders, in and out of the marketplace pretty fluidly right now. Lenders have definitely increased their scrutiny in terms of credit quality. Couple of other general observations. We see purchasing activity is down, but refinancing activity is up. We hope that the purchasing activity will snap back pretty quickly when everything's normalized, that there's some pent-up demand. Some lenders are offering interest rate reductions to their current borrowers. So in a case where you may looking to be wanting to refinance, that could be your better option. But in some cases, your current lender might give you a better interest rate or some kind of a restructure just to keep you on the books, mostly in the form of a reduced interest rate. The larger cabin segment of the market seems to be a lot more affected than the smaller end of the market on the owner-flown GA. We're seeing more activity in owner-flown and probably less activity in the big cabin right now. In general, even though there's been quite a shakeup, reshuffling of the deck, changing of lenders, and all these things have happened in a short period of time, we're happy to report that loans are closing. The dream is still alive to own an aircraft and get it financed. It's still happening. Maybe happening in a little bit different way. And we're hopeful that, maybe it'll go back to normal sooner rather than later. But transactions still are definitely happening. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Sam. Some fantastic takeaways there. And next up, we have Jamie Steele-Potter from Steele Aviation, one of the nation's top aviation brokers. Jamie, how are you?
I'm well. How are you, Chris?
Great, thanks. So you're obviously very experienced in aviation sales. Have you seen any changes in your sales during the pandemic?
So when everything started approximately, it's been 6 weeks ago, we had 10 airplanes in our pipeline. All 10 of those airplanes have since closed with the exception of one. One was kind of nervous, with the COVID-19, just didn't want to move forward. Since the tax incentives, the carryback, the tax credits that they're giving, he actually contacted us 2 weeks, it's been about a week ago, to continue that transaction. So the tax incentive shoved that one through as well. And then we've also put 5 aircraft into our pipeline in the last 6 weeks. So overall, I mean, it's not bad. We're not breaking any records, but we're certainly busy.
So no panic selling or drop in prices?
We have seen, a few aircraft come to market. We've definitely increased traffic that way, but no one seems to be, giving airplanes away. No one's wholesaling them. No one's dropping them off at my doorstep, wanting me to purchase them at, a huge discount. So we haven't really seen panic. No, not at all.
For a private aircraft owner, what do you recommend they do right now?
The biggest thing is not to panic. And if you have maintenance items that need to be addressed or corrected, or you want to do upgrading to your aircraft, now's the perfect time to get that stuff done. I think that it's really important to exercise your airplane. Don't leave it sit. Make sure it's being utilized, even if it's just a quick flight for an hour or two. But do not leave your airplane sit around for the next 2 or 3 months, just not flying it. That's going to do more damage than it is good. So definitely keep flying.
Do you see any changes in the way we sell aircraft now with the social distancing?
I can tell you it takes 20 Lysol wipes to sanitize a Cirrus. So just a fun fact right there. You know, as far as how we're selling planes, I think we need to be more aggressive on social media, marketing, advertising, things like that. We've definitely stepped up our game in those regards. But I think people are also looking at general aviation very differently than they used to. You know, a lot of my friends wouldn't fly with me, right? They're like, you know, the small airplanes were afraid of them, and now they're calling me to take them places, right? So I think you're going to see a shift in the mindset of, you know, general aviation and how useful it's going to be to people in the future. A lot of people don't want to hop on an airline packed with 200 people that, you know, they don't know who they are and where they've been. So I think it's definitely gonna impact us in a positive way.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jamie. And last but certainly not least, we have Adam Meredith from AOPA Finance. Adam, how's it going?
Good, Chris. How you doing?
Good, good. Obviously, there have been a lot of changes in the financial world in the past few weeks. What are some of the biggest changes that you've seen?
Yeah, so overall, I mean, just to give a sense, we last year probably helped right around 800 pilots, last couple of years anyway, get financing on aircraft. So we certainly do quite a bit of that. And I think probably the big thing, not terribly surprising, that we're seeing is that a lot of people are taking a pause right now in terms of purchasing aircraft. And I think kind of where I see it currently, which is a bit interesting, is there's in the last week or two been quite an uptick in terms of new people calling in for interest in looking at purchasing an aircraft. So I think there's quite a bit of frankly, to my surprise, interest in looking at aviation and in doing something. And I don't know if it's that people have got a little more time on their hands, or and it's something that they always wanted to do necessarily, or if it's just a sign that, you know, maybe things are going to start to turn positive here soon. But we've definitely within the last 2 weeks seen kind of a reversal of where the number of new sort of calls coming in had dwindled earlier on in the early parts of April and in late March. And within the last, like I said, probably last week and this week, we've seen, you know, kind of change in that, which is good and encouraging, I think.
What changes have you seen among your membership or your customers? Are they doing anything differently?
So membership, you know, from that perspective, I just recently got off a call there. It seems like membership's pretty steady. No significant changes there. I think it's in times like this that people really value the work that AOPA does, above and beyond even in the financing side, in particular. You know, all of the stuff that we're doing within Washington and helping pilots with questions about, you know, where can I travel, where can't I travel, and as you can well imagine, right now that's a pretty fluid situation, so we tend to really be a resource for folks, and I think it's in these times that people are looking to us probably now more than ever.
What's something that an aircraft owner should keep in mind right now?
Obviously, safety is paramount to everything, and you know, as a pilot myself, the thing that I would be concerned about now is making sure that I'm going to be in compliance with any issues or challenges with wherever I'm going. I mean, I know that, you know, some airports are you know, going to be screening you to see where you've been coming from, and, you know, making sure you've got everything kind of in order. And from my colleagues on the other side of the house, I know that they kind of keep a running tally of what the best practices are. So I don't think that I could give you an up-to-date answer as to what that is, other than state by state. You know, each state seems to be having its own different way of handling it, and so be prepared before you fly, I guess, is probably my biggest takeaway from that side of things.
Awesome. Thank you, Adam.
All right, we're getting ready for the live Q&A. I know we have a lot of questions coming in the chat and a lot of material. So before we get to the questions, just wanted to get a handout to you guys. This is going to be, actually we'll have this emailed to you here. So it's going to go through all the takeaways that we've had from the webinar, as well as contact info for everyone here. So you're going to get that in your email after the fact. And now let's get to some of these great questions. Okay, so first up, this is a question that came in, actually emailed in earlier today. about the King Air C90B market. So how great is the effect of the pandemic on the King Air C90B? And Ken, I'm gonna get you unmuted here. Hey, Ken, can you hear us? Sure he's unmuted here. I know we got 14 people in here, so just make sure we're all muted at the same time.
Can you hear me, Chris?
Yes, sir. Yeah. So how do you think of the effect of the pandemic on the King Air C90B?
Well, as most of the folks in joining us today all know, that the C90 King Air is the baby series of the airplane. It's been in production since 1964 through currently. It has arisen to, with the Gorman update, a pretty significant price point, pushing $4 million. Obviously less than its bigger brothers, but still a pretty high price point. Needless to say, we are studying all of the markets and how this pandemic will be affecting all markets, the turboprop, as well as all the conversation we've had this morning about general aviation, smaller aircraft versus bigger aircraft. You've already heard a lot of that. So it probably will continue to have some downward pressure on the baby King Air, if you will. What that is at this moment, to quantify it, I don't have a clear-cut answer for you, but I would suspect that it's probably going to be a more downward trend than a flattening trend at this time.
Got it. Fantastic insights. Thank you so much, Ken. Now we're going to get to another question in the chat here. This one is about BizJet. So what do you think about the highest leveraged BizJet fleet operators right now? Dan, I'm going to unmute you. I know you shared a little bit about this a few moments ago. And Dan, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
So yeah, what do you think about the very highest leverage BizJet fleet operators? I know it sounded like a sort of net downward trend from your earlier segment.
We were looking at this specifically as we started to see some of the news come out about the charter card, the fleet operators shutting down operations. One of the first operations I think that was publicly announced was the Jet fleet of airplanes, obviously notably the Embraer fleets. But I don't want to call out specific operators' names right now, but they're obviously in ranked order. A lot of pressure for the leverage purchase of the assets that belong to a lot of these fleet and card carriers. I think that the longer this goes on, obviously, the more overhead pressure and the more financial pressure that puts on. We've been kind of going back and forth on whether this is going to be a restructuring, a consolidation, whether we're going to see some repossessions and some UCC sales, and then in some cases, we actually know that some of these operators are subsidized by private equity. And so, the financial instruments that are actually used to hold the airplane will be interesting to see unravel. I don't think that we're going to see this quickly because of probably the debt restructuring, maybe bankruptcy mechanisms, consolidation, and or workout repossession type activity. But it's something to keep an eye on. And we always tell our clients there are two markets in every corporate aviation turbine market environment. There are those that come out of charter fleets or card fleets, so to speak, fractional, and there are those who are used like a normal corporate airplane. I think you and I spoke a little bit about even some of the trade-in fleets. We know that Cessna is holding quite a few XLs that got traded in from the NetJets fleet. We may see some manufacturer deals get cut that involve some trade-ins on some of these card programs. So it's a segment of the market to keep an eye out for. It's going to be a lot of value for those folks who can stomach higher time airplanes that are looking for just value operation. And it might be a way that we see charter and card and fractional and program models restructure as some of these airplanes come available, and we might have some entrepreneurial activity with folks looking to solve some airlift problems moving forward.
Got it. So obviously we've got the trade-ins. Is there any other way or anything that like a NetJets or ExoJets or flight options should keep in mind to be able to move forward in this market?
I don't want to comment on any particular operator name at this time, but I would definitely say that as we're doing our consulting, we definitely have those organizations rank stacked in order of pressure that we feel that they're under, and I think we've got some good ideas on who's going to be grounding the fleets next, and which pressure is going to affect which operators. It's reasonably foreseeable.
Got it. Awesome, Dan. Thanks so much for those insights. I'll get you muted here. Next up, question for Andreas. This is about how the COVID-19, and I know we obviously covered this a bit in your presentation, but how will the COVID-19 crisis and connected economic downturn affect business jet values for small, medium, and large aircraft in the European market? And how can they be considered in the valuation of an aircraft?
Well, hello, everybody.
Long question.
I just wanted to say, I haven't got my crystal ball yet, and I think Ken and Jason haven't got theirs either. No, but give you an honest answer, I don't think that there is really a European market for business jets. It may be true for small aircraft, for proper aircraft, sports aircraft, due to tax reasons, noise requirements. But business jet market is a global market, and in Europe we operate about 14% of the worldwide fleet of business aircraft. 2/3 are in North America. So even if we put 25% of the European fleet on the market in an instant, it's only 4% of the worldwide fleet. So I would say that the European impact is not that strong, so that we can really say that we have a European market. It's a global market, and I think we all agree that people will have a different look on general aviation and business aviation in the future. They will not want to travel on larger aircraft with 300 people they do not know. The airlines will stop serving second and third tier routes where they got the growth from. So there will be a demand in business aircraft, and so I do not think that there will be much of impact on this market. And I'm now involved currently in 4 aircraft transactions, and they go on, although there is the crisis. So people are still buying aircraft, they're interested in aircraft, and the operators are really longing to get all those travel bans lifted so that they can start operating again. And I think that business travel will be allowed in Europe first, and then the people will have to rely on business aviation, because the airlines will only open when tourism is again allowed, and that's not will not be the case before the end of the summer. So the summer season is over in Europe. And Lufthansa and Austrian announced yesterday that they will only start operating in June or July again. So if we can travel for business in May and June, we will have to do it on business aircraft. And in regard to reporting, well, I would say that's a question under which standards you're operating. AVS requires you to report the market on the day of your report. So you are not required to see into the future and do some guessing what the value will be in the future, unless you're required to give a forecast on residual values. But that's a question of the scope of work you're agreeing, and AVS also requires you to put all special assumptions or specific assumptions into your scope of work. So that's something that's a question of technique and not of market reporting. And there are a lot of data out there that you can use. You have data influence of GDP, influence of consumer price index, influence of fuel prices on the market of aircraft, in particular larger aircraft. So that's a technical question, or a question of how you do your work, and has not really to do with the market, and specifically not with the European market, because it's a global market for jets.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Andreas. Next up, we have a question for Ken. What do you see as far as forecasting the pricing and market for single engine piston airplanes such as the Cessna Turbo 182 in the next 6 to 12 months? Let me just get you unmuted here. Okay, you should be unmuted now. Just to repeat, yeah, any forecast on the pricing and market of single engine piston airplanes like the Cessna Turbo 182?
Well, the 182, similar to the King Air, has been even produced longer than the King Air. Started production in the 182 series in 1956, believe it or not. So that airplane has been produced for a long, long time. Excuse me. It is traditionally used as a go-to airplane after you learn to fly and leave. Sometimes it's smaller brothers, the 150, 152, 172 series, which are very popular for flight training. And then that is usually a step up go-to, as is Cirrus and other airplanes, to be an owner flown type airplane, because it has a great useful load, can handle 4 passengers easily, or pilot 3 passengers, and has good speed. The airplane is still in production today with the turbocharged version. The single engine flight training market has probably been the hottest market in recent years because of demand for flight training. Now that's going to change somewhat, obviously, as we talked about earlier. But in my opinion, in my crystal ball, is that the pricing will probably stay pretty flat, if not even trickle up slightly because of supply and demand, because it is a strong airplane. It's a very popular airplane, and the owner flown segment will continue to seek it.
Excellent. Thank you, Ken. Next up, we got a question. Looks like a couple people probably be a good fit for this one. Do you see the lenders pulling back as they're less certain of aircraft residual values? So Sam, I'm going to start with you and then get you unmuted here just one moment. Hang on one second. Sam, can you hear me okay?
Yes, Chris, I can hear you.
Oh, perfect. So do you see the lenders pulling back as they're less certain of aircraft residual values?
Well, to answer your question, I'm seeing quite a bit of pullback from lenders all across the spectrum, from GA lenders to lenders that lend on mid-sized jets, large cabin jets. I don't have exact percentages, but you know, we're in the market every day doing financing transactions, and I could tell you that across the board, I would think that 25% plus of our lenders have either paused or exited the space. Not to say they're not going to come back, but right now, a lot of these banks are hoarding their capital because they don't know what their loan losses could be. If this situation continues on, it's going to have an impact on banks in general, not just in aviation lending, but to lend on aviation assets, you know, you have to put capital out the door. So there's been a lot of impact and a lot of lenders pulling out. We are working with other lending sources that are coming in, and so transactions are definitely happening, but it's a really fluid, dynamic situation for sure.
Got it. Thanks, Sam. And Adam, how about you? What have you seen in your neck of the woods with regards to lenders pulling back and being less certain of aircraft values?
Yeah, so thank you. You know, I think for, you know, my perspective, it kind of depends on this. I agree kind of with what Sam is saying. There are a bunch of folks that are, or lenders that are pulling out of it, but it really, from what we're seeing, depends on the segment of the portfolio that they're in. Meaning if they're mostly larger cabin, mid-sized cabin aircraft, there's definitely some pause and some reason potentially in residual values to erode a little bit in that segment. However, in the segment that's the owner flown and in the single engine piston is kind of Ken is talking about, and Ken, I completely agree with you in the pricing on the 182s and in that segment, we're still seeing strong demand there too. I don't see that for those reasons any lender that's in those is for the most part staying in, and they're not as concerned about the residual values. However, Sam, I agree with what you're saying. I have seen a number of banks that are pausing or exiting, and I would attribute most of that to lenders that don't have a lot of experience in the space. They haven't weathered the storm previously, or at least that's from what I'm seeing. The lenders who are pulling out, it's those that have not necessarily been doing this for as long. I think there's potentially, this is just Adam's opinion, I think there's some reason for concern in the larger aircraft side of it. I don't think there's much reason beyond that, though, to be concerned to pull back.
Awesome. Thank you, Adam.
Yep.
And now some questions coming in about the educational side of things. So why online training, since we're able to do social distancing with pilots in the cabin? And Neil, I'll get you kicked off here, and then Ken, get you right on afterwards. So Neil, what do you think about that? Why are we doing online if we can social distance with pilots?
Thank you, Chris. Well, I think it's right now I'm kind of taking the optimistic approach to this, and I think we're just hit the pause button here for a brief minute with the face-to-face and hands-on. it's a great opportunity. There's a lot of support classes that we can do without having the face-to-face right now. We've got flight physiology, aerodynamics, safety management systems, just to name a few of that kind of stuff. Simulated work, still can do that kind of stuff. But anything that involves face-to-face, or we got two people sitting in close proximity to one another in a contained cabin. We're just taking we're taking the approach that just we want to protect the pilot training that we do at the highest level at the best of our ability right now. So it's in my opinion, it's going to come back fairly fast. It's just we just hit the pause button for a moment.
Awesome. And Ken, what do you think about that? Any other insights on going online as opposed to social distancing only in a cabin? Oops. Make sure he's unmuted. Ken, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I got you.
Oh, perfect.
Neil's right. We're we at Embry-Riddle, we're reviewing this scenario. Obviously, we have probably the largest flight training environment in the collegiate space, and we're taking a look at, and of course, making some adjustments to that, and of course about the UAS comments we talked about earlier. It's going to change. Obviously, it has to change. We've always had a very robust worldwide campus where we delivered the majority, if not all, of the same courses except flight online, and have been rated very high. So we're going to adapt some of those courses, like Neil's adapting some of his avionics courses and putting them, online, and it's going to be a big factor in the future. We're still evaluating flight training and how that goes forward in the flight training world. There will be some changes, obviously, but we believe that with taking some different and appropriate action, we'll be able to resume pretty quickly and continue forward.
Excellent. Thanks, Ken. Next up, a question for Clay. This attendee said that he participated in a webinar related to the change in process. I see. Change in process and additional time needed to register aircraft with the FAA during COVID-19. Can you comment? Oops, I'm sorry. I think Clay might be having some audio issues here. We will circle back to this, and we'll actually get this emailed to you just in case. I'll get you. Don't worry. We'll circle back to this question. Next up for Adam, how will banks respond to workouts? Will there be massive repossessions? 1 second to get you unmuted here. There we go.
Yeah, I think I don't know that I'm going to see we're going to see massive repossessions. Again, all of this is sort of predicated on how quickly the overall economy returns, right? If we believe kind of what we see from the talking heads, we should be coming back to a slow recovery. I think the latest that I had seen recently was like the Nike swoosh, right? And if that happens, I don't think we're going to see massive repossessions. Kind of back to the answer before, where I do think there will be repossessions is in aged turbine aircraft, where banks truly are going to have a lot more, I think, exposure, because potentially the values in those are going to erode much more quickly than they would in any other segment. All that being said, historically, the performance of aircraft relative to any other asset category for lenders has far outperformed most of them. So those with experience in this, I think, are going to be reasonable about it. My concern, however, would be for those that don't have as much experience in the space and how they might react to it, not knowing how to handle it. So when we were in it, when I was working on the lending side of it, it proved quite prudent for us to have been very understanding and not too proactive in trying to repossess aircraft. It almost always worked out better for us.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam. Next up, a question for Dick. What impact has the recent Kobe Bryant crash and natural disasters like the tornadoes in Tennessee have on insurance? Let me get you unmuted here 1 sec. There we go. Dick, can you hear me?
I think, is it working?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Well, there'll be, I think, two impacts from the Kobe crash. I have generally, as I said earlier, a very positive outlook on us recovering in the helicopter industry from the financial side of it. But the Kobe crash has already had some significant negative impact on my industry. Kobe's crash was January 26th. I remember it well because I looked out the window and I was shocked that anybody was flying that day. I had already postponed four tours that morning for the weather. My insurance renewed March 16th. Now, just to give you an example, I'm a 62-year-old company having insurance for that length. So I have a very, very good rate that I get from the insurance company due to our long history. My insurance went up 35% in premiums that day, 100% due to the Kobe crash. The other significant problem is they cut my limits from 20 million to 10 million. And the ones I had at 10 million, they cut to 5 million. So in essence, we had a massive increase in the premiums because we don't get the coverage. The significance of that is that, for instance, to land at a remote heliport that's private or a building top in Los Angeles, you need a minimum of $10 million insurance. And some of them require 20. For instance, at the Staples Center, it's 20 million. So I can no longer land at the Staples Center to drop tourists off or to drop attendees of an event there. That is, I have my broker told me that he had another customer that was insured for $200 million. He had a Cessna, a Citation, and he had an A-Star. And he had $200 million coverage, and his premium went up 100%, and they cut the coverage to 100 million.
Wow.
Those numbers are such that, you know, some corporations can't continue to have the aircraft with only, I know it sounds like a high number, $100 million insurance, but the impact of that is huge because their corporate structure won't allow them to operate with those low of limits. So that's a huge impact on our industry, which will obviously will be significant once we get back to flying. And things like motion picture filming requires $10 or $20 million. Many of my customers can't fly in the aircraft without, private customers that are of high net worth can't fly in a helicopter with less than 20 or 40 or $50 million insurance. So that, again, a huge impact on that. I think the other impact is going to be regulatory. My news helicopters fly 20-25% of the time in special VFR conditions. In my opinion, and already having some off the record discussions with several of my FAA personnel and other regulatory personnel, since Van Nuys is very critical in regulating helicopters. It appears to be the primary helicopter expertise in the FAA as far as operations. I have a distinct feeling that we will lose special VFR conditions, at least to some degree. And that would seriously affect our ability to do many, many jobs. For instance, flying news. We fly over freeways 400 or 500 feet off the freeway. We don't need more than a mile visibility. There's no obstructions, there's no wires, there's no antennas, we fly on the right and the one way and the right on the other way. So it's not really a significant problem for us. However, I think that would certainly affect our ability to continue to make enough revenue if we're limited to the number of flights we can do. As far as the Tennessee tornadoes, I think the problem there is going to be more. There's really no liability there on the impact of the helicopter owner, unless he also owned the building. So stuff like that has a huge impact on hangar keepers. For instance, in Los Angeles, I'm in an earthquake zone. The latest 2 hangars we built are super anti-earthquake engineered, because typically if there's an issue like a tornado, an earthquake, or a massive hurricane or flood, the damage to the aircraft inside the hangars is total most of the time. And many of those aircraft are not insured for the full amount that maybe they should be insured for. And they'll fall back on your hangar keepers, and they will always try to find a way of bringing you into court and have in a situation where possibly your building was substandard. Even if it isn't, they're going to bring that up in order to try to settle for a higher number. Again, that's going to raise our insurance premiums. So I don't like to talk about negative things, but I think that is a negative. There will be negative results from both of those incidents, with the Kobe Bryant crash being the most significant change. The other massive change we had was during the Vic Morrow crash on Twilight Zone movie, made huge impact on our industry. I was actually there when that happened, on site. And I think at the time that was probably the biggest impact other than 9/11 that we had on our operations. And I think the Kobe Bryant thing is 100 times have more impact.
Awesome. Thanks, Dick. Some great insights there. Next up, question for Jason. Let's get you unmuted here. And this was regarding, what do you think the projected percentage decrease for light, medium, and heavy corporate jets will be when the next VREF comes out?
Hey, Chris, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, sure can.
So I just want to thank you for doing this today, and I really appreciate it. In terms of the question, so we're what, a month into the second quarter, and second and third quarters are typically slow in business aviation anyway. We were seeing, the larger the business jet, and I think a lot of people have alluded to this already, the larger the aircraft, I think the bigger the slide, so to speak, on the downward side. And the truth is, there's just been a lot of, there's a lack of transaction activity in a lot of the bigger markets. So we are going to see, some more depreciation in the bigger business jets. I also think it was Adam or Ken that alluded to it earlier, that, the older turbine fleet, especially in the United States, is going to see, again, another reduction in value. We have been crunching the numbers as they come in. A lot of people are reporting. We had a couple transactions reported this morning. I think, unfortunately, the bigger the aircraft, the slower it has been, just trying to figure out patterns and trends, just because there hasn't been a lot of transactions occurring. And the other interesting side note is that even before this insane pandemic started, we were already forecasting a slide in the business jet market. I think the flip side is the single engine piston market is still doing great. If anything, worst case is going to be, a flat market for a while. We are eagerly anticipating when this is going to end, because we're trying to figure out if we're going to be able to save, what's left of the buying season, for people that like to go to air shows and actually use their aircraft in the summer months. So I do think the longer this goes, there is a potential for things, unfortunately, to go down. But I'm just not seeing any data that would suggest there's going to be any big changes. This wasn't an economic issue when it started. Unfortunately, it has become one. And I think that we're just, where we are now is just trying to figure out, credit worthiness of the borrower versus, the asset strength and what it is. It gets really complicated. But older aircraft in general, if they've been modified and upgraded and they're still operating, yeah, I would suspect banks are going to want more skin in the game to lend on those aircraft going forward. And then in terms of, the big aircraft, I don't know what really to tell people until we start seeing more transaction volume come through. And again, there's highlights across the board. I'm not going to pick on anybody, and I'm certainly not going to, I don't want to bring up any positives or negatives by name or manufacturer, but I think, all in all, we are very cautious right now about doing anything knee-jerk reaction-wise. We are crunching the data. We will be making those updates here in the next couple of weeks. We've had several calls in the last week or two already with the staff. But in terms of percentages, I think it's a little too early to tell, but I do think the newer and the bigger the airplane is in corporate aviation anyway, you're going to see another dip.
Awesome. And we actually just had a new question pop in just now. It looks like maybe the last one, about a pilot transitioning from a newer Bonanza to a TBM who had 800 hours of total time and got quoted over $100,000 in insurance from the only underwriter willing to consider it. Do you think that is a bigger risk to our industry than even COVID itself?
So I'm probably the worst person to ask an insurance question to, but look, we've been hearing this, and this is not new. We've been seeing, you know, people complain about premiums going up and up and up. I've read all the same complaints from people, you know, that have been trying to buy aircraft and been venting those opinions very publicly. Insurance has been under a lot of pressure for a long time. I mean, is it going to kill deals? Yeah, I also think that sometimes there's more to the story. So, and I don't know if anybody else on the panel wants to tackle insurance, but you know, from where I sit, there seems to be more behind the scenes, so to speak, than, you know, an insurance company just completely jacking premiums to a point where somebody can't afford to operate the aircraft. Dick, you want to chime in?
Unmuted here.
Or Ken, you want to chime in? I think Ken said he can address it.
Sure. Ken, let me get you unmuted here.
Yeah, I can too. Either one is fine.
Yeah, I'll start, Dick. You know, it's not unusual. We traditionally see lower time pilots transitioning up to bigger equipment. That's always a challenge on the insurance side. And with the hardened insurance market, as Dick was speaking about earlier, whether it's Kobe, whether it's the tornadoes that we've been experiencing through the Southeast United States, they're getting really tough on insurance, and they will usually traditionally impose a significant amount of transitional training and or dual instruction for a person making that transition. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. So it's going to have to be something that we're going to have to live with for a while. And it's best to seek additional quotes, be willing to do additional training, you know, whether it be ground school and or flight training in a dual basis to help ease some of their concerns.
I think just a brief comment about how insurance works. The reason a lot of underwriters won't quote is that they can't get reinsurance. And what limits the insurance industry is that, as you know, when you buy insurance, that insurance company sells the policy, gets reinsurance spread out over 2 companies. Those 2 companies get it over 4 more companies, and it goes on down the line. In the Kobe Bryant case, for example, there's 12 insurance companies involved, including the reinsurance. So again, what happens is those down the line fall out. They won't do it. So that makes the initial underwriter not be able to do it. And then the brokers have nowhere to go. So if you understand how that works, that's the main factor. It will wash out in the end, as with values of aircraft and economics, it eventually fades away and comes, you know, gets back into a normal situation. I think it would take a year or 2 or 3, and we'll be back to a normal insurance rates, but time will tell. We'll see.
Excellent. Thank you, Dick. Well, that looks like that is all of our questions. Actually, wait, sorry, one last one. Oh, actually, just a comment from Wilson that he believed the premium was the underwriters believed there was too much aircraft for the pilot. Yeah, that sounds like in line with what we were saying earlier. Excellent. Well, we really appreciate you guys being on the call. Be sure to grab your handout from the handouts tab. You also get your continuing education certification via email. And if you have any additional questions, you can feel free to email us at info@vref.com. Otherwise, thanks so much, everybody. We appreciate you all being on the call, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody. And thanks to Panagiotis for setting all of this up as well from Aeropodium.
Yes, thank you, Panagiotis.